The winter evening in northern Arizona settled slowly over the wide open land, and the sky began to change from a soft orange to a deep blue. The wind blew across the fields with a cold, sharp touch that made even the strongest ranch animals move closer to the barns. Ethan Walker, a quiet and hard-working rancher in his late 30s, finished checking the fencing on the east side of his property. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself as he rode his horse back toward the ranch house. Winters in this part of the state could be unpredictable, sometimes mild, but sometimes dangerously cold. Tonight felt like the second kind. The kind of cold that makes a man feel it in his bones. Ethan was used to being alone on the ranch. His parents had passed away years ago, and his sister lived in another state. Most evenings were quiet. He fed the horses, made a simple dinner, and spent the rest of the night doing small repairs or reading. But tonight, as he rode through the quiet land, something felt different. He didn't know why. But he kept looking toward the old dirt road that passed near his fence line, the one that led toward the Apache reservation several miles away. As he approached the curve near the southern fence, he noticed something unusual, a lone figure walking slowly along the side of the road. At first, Ethan thought it might be a lost tourist. People sometimes wandered off the main highway and wound up on these forgotten back roads. But as he got closer, he realized this wasn't a tourist. It was a young woman, probably in her early 20s, bundled in a thin jacket that was clearly not warm enough for the freezing night. He slowed his horse, watching her while keeping a respectful distance. She walked with small, tired steps, hugging herself against the cold. Her dark hair was messy, blown around by the wind. The moment the wind stopped for a second, he heard the crunch of her boots on the frozen ground. She looked exhausted, more exhausted than someone who was simply out for a walk. Concern rose in his chest. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who ignored someone in trouble. Out here, in such a quiet and distant place, people relied on each other. No matter who they were, the cold could be dangerous. Many times in his life, he had seen what winter nights could do to someone who was stranded or unprepared. He guided his horse closer but made sure not to frighten her. From a few yards away, he called out, "Evening, miss. Are you all right out here?" The young woman stopped walking and turned toward him. She didn't look afraid, just tired and cold. Her cheeks were red from the wind, and her hands were trembling slightly. She tried to speak, but the cold made her voice soft. "My truck broke down," she said after a second. "It's several miles back. No signal. And I need to warm up tonight. The cold is getting worse." Her words were simple, honest, and carried a small hint of worry. Ethan immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. She wasn't asking for anything unusual. She literally needed warmth and safety from the freezing night. He climbed off his horse. "You're too far from town to walk," he said gently, "and the temperature's dropping fast. You shouldn't stay out here. My ranch house is close. You can warm up there until we figure something out." She hesitated for a moment, studying him carefully. He didn't blame her. The world had its dangers, and she had every right to be cautious. After a few seconds, she nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate it." As she stepped closer, Ethan noticed she was wearing the traditional beadwork earrings, often seen among Apache women. He had grown up near the reservation and respected the people and their traditions, though he never tried to involve himself where he didn't belong. Ranchers and Apache families shared the land but lived mostly separate lives, unless help was needed. "What's your name?" Ethan asked, as they began walking toward his ranch house. "Nayeli," she said, tucking her hands deeper into her sleeves. "I live on the reservation. I was coming back from a community event, and the truck gave up on me." Ethan nodded. "I'm Ethan. My place is just a little ahead. You'll be out of this cold soon. I be ya. 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 I be ya." The walk to the ranch house took about 10 minutes. With every step, the cold grew stronger, and the sky darker. The last bit of sunlight disappeared behind the distant hills. The wind picked up again, carrying the winter air across the land. Ethan could tell that Nayeli was slowing down, her breaths becoming heavier. She wasn't used to long walks in such weather, especially after already walking who knew how many miles. "Do you need to rest a moment?" Ethan asked. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head, though her voice revealed fatigue. "I can keep going. Your house is not far. I'll be fine." Cheesing, but despite her strong spirit, Ethan could feel the urgency building. He walked a little faster, guiding her toward the warm lights of the ranch house that were now visible in the distance. Finally, they reached the porch. Ethan opened the door and held it for her. As soon as she stepped inside, a wave of warm air greeted them both. The fireplace in the living room still held heat from earlier in the day, and the room felt like a safe, gentle shelter compared to the freezing darkness outside. Nayeli let out a small sigh of relief. It wasn't loud, but it carried the feeling of someone who had finally escaped something dangerous. Ethan closed the door behind them and hung his jacket on the hook near the entrance. "You can sit by the fire," he said. "I'll bring you a blanket." Nayeli nodded gratefully and walked over to the sofa near the fireplace. She placed her hands close to the heat, slowly warming her fingers. Ethan took a thick blanket from the hallway closet and handed it to her. "Thank you," she said quietly as she wrapped it around herself. "Would you like something warm to drink?" he asked. "Tea, hot chocolate, coffee?" "Tea would be nice," she replied. Ethan went into the kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it on the stove. As he waited for the water to boil, he kept glancing toward the living room to make sure she was all right. She sat calmly, looking into the fire with tired eyes. There was something peaceful about her presence, like she was used to facing challenges without complaining. When the tea was ready, Ethan brought it to her along with a small plate of warm bread he had baked earlier in the day. She accepted both with a grateful expression. "You're very kind," she said. "I didn't think anyone would pass by the road tonight." "Not many people do," Ethan replied. "But you're lucky I decided to check the fencing before heading home." She smiled faintly. "Maybe the land wanted to help me today." 4. Ethan didn't fully understand what she meant, but he respected her words. Many Apache people believed the land, wind, and sky carried messages or guidance. Ethan had always admired that kind of connection. "Do you know what might be wrong with your truck?" he asked. "The engine overheated," she said. "It's an old truck, and I guess today wasn't its day. When the weather warms up tomorrow, I can help tow it here," Ethan offered. "We can take a look at it." "You've already done so much," she said gently. "But thank you, I really appreciate it." The warmth of the fire slowly brought color back to her face. Her hands, once shaking, were now steady. She drank the tea slowly, letting the heat spread through her body. Ethan sat on the chair across from her, giving her space but staying close enough to talk if she felt comfortable. Outside, the wind howled louder, and the windows shook lightly. The weather had turned worse than either of them expected. Ethan was glad she wasn't out walking in that. People had lost their lives on cold nights like this. The land was beautiful, but it could be harsh too. Nayeli looked around the room, observing the wooden walls, the old photos on the shelves, and the ranch tools hung neatly near the door. "Your home feels strong," she said softly. "Like it's been here a long time." "It has," Ethan replied. "My father built most of it. I try to keep it the same way he left it." There was a moment of quiet, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. Then Nayeli said, "I didn't know what to do out there. I tried to stay calm. But the cold, it makes you feel small." "You handled it better than most people would," Ethan said honestly. "You kept moving. That's what saved you." She smiled again. This time, more fully. "My grandfather used to say that when something is difficult, you take one more step, and then another, even if it feels impossible." "That's good advice," Ethan said. As the night grew even colder outside, the atmosphere inside the ranch house became warm and peaceful. Two strangers, brought together by a broken truck and freezing air, sat near the fire, sharing a quiet, simple moment of understanding. Ethan didn't ask too many questions, and Nayeli didn't offer more than she wanted. There was respect in the silence between them. For the first time that evening, Nayeli let her shoulders rest. She looked more relaxed, safe, and comfortable. The fear of the cold night had left her eyes. Ethan watched her carefully, making sure she wasn't feeling dizzy or unwell from the cold. "You're safe here," he said gently. "You can rest as long as you need." Nayeli nodded. "Thank you, Ethan. Truly." Outside, winter continued to deepen its hold on the land. But inside the ranch house, warmth spread softly through the space. A simple act of kindness had changed the direction of a dangerous night, and the story that had begun with a broken truck was already turning into something far more meaningful. The warmth inside the ranch house slowly wrapped around Nayeli like a gentle blanket. After a few minutes near the fire, the trembling in her hands disappeared, and color returned to her cheeks. Ethan watched from a short distance, careful not to crowd her, giving her space to settle and breathe. He could tell she was calming down, the fear of the cold slowly fading from her eyes. Ethan sat in the chair across from her, turning slightly so she wouldn't feel like he was staring. He wasn't a man of many words, but he had always been good at reading people. He could sense that Nayeli was the kind of person who carried quiet strength, the kind built through experiences rather than loud speeches. There was patience in her, and a softness that didn't hide her determination. After a while, Nayeli looked around the room more closely. The ranch house had a warm, rustic charm. Wooden beams crossed the ceiling, worn by time but still strong. Old photographs hung on the walls, some showing cattle grazing in open fields, others showing a younger version of Ethan with his parents. The furniture wasn't fancy, but it was sturdy and clean. A handmade quilt lay neatly folded on the back of the couch, its patterns showing the touch of someone who had cared about every detail. "It's peaceful here," Nayeli said softly. Ethan nodded. "It's quiet most days. Just me, the animals, and the wind. Do you ever get lonely?" He considered her question for a moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But the land keeps you busy. It doesn't let you feel lonely for too long." Nayeli smiled slightly, understanding more than he expected. "I think I know what you mean. On the reservation, there's always someone around. Family, neighbors, community events. But even with people nearby, the land makes you feel like you're part of something bigger, like you're never truly alone." Ethan liked the way she said that. He had grown up around Apache families, though he didn't know many personally. He respected their connection to the land. A connection deeper than most people realized. Many ranchers talked about hard work and long days, but the Apache people spoke of the earth like it was a living thing, something that guided them and protected them. Nayeli shifted in her seat, wrapping the blanket more closely around her shoulders. "My grandfather used to teach me stories about this land," she said. "About how every hill and every wind has a memory. He said, 'The land listens to our footsteps.'" "That's beautiful," Ethan replied. "My father didn't talk much about things like that, but he always said the land notices when you take good care of it. Maybe it's the same idea." Nayeli nodded softly. "I think so." For a few moments, they both fell quiet. Not out of awkwardness, but out of a shared calm. The crackling fire filled the room with gentle sound, and the wind outside tapped lightly against the windows. It was the kind of silence that makes two strangers feel more comfortable, not less. After a while, Nayeli took a sip of her tea and said, "I was teaching today at the community center. That's why I was driving back so late." "Teaching?" Ethan asked, curious. "Yes, I work with children," she explained. "We teach them Apache history, language, and stories. It's important for them to know where they come from. The world is changing fast, and sometimes our traditions get pushed aside, so we teach them to hold on to the stories." Ethan listened with genuine interest. "That sounds meaningful. Those kids are lucky to have you." Nayeli shrugged modestly. "I just do what I can. I had good teachers when I was young. Now, it's my turn." There was a quiet pride in her voice, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be real. "What about you?" she asked. "Have you always been a rancher?" Ethan leaned back slightly. "Pretty much. I grew up here. My father taught me everything: how to ride, how to care for the horses, how to fix fences, and how to live with the land instead of fighting it. My sister left for the city when she got older, but I stayed. Someone had to take care of the place. Do you ever wish you left too? He looked at the fire as he thought about her question. Maybe once or twice when I was younger. But now, no. This land is home. It's peaceful. You speak like someone who belongs to this place, Nayeli said. Ethan's eyes softened. Maybe I do. Another strong gust of wind shook the windows, and both of them glanced toward the door. The night outside looked darker and colder than before. The storm was getting stronger. I'm glad you weren't out there any longer, Ethan said. Nights like this can be dangerous. Nayeli nodded slowly. I kept walking because I didn't want to stop moving. When you stop, the cold feels heavier. I just kept telling myself to take one more step. But I was running out of strength. You made the right choice, Ethan said. If you had stayed on the road too long, the cold would have won. I'm glad I found you. So am I, she said quietly. Ethan stood up. Are you hungry? I can cook something simple. Nayeli looked hesitant. I don't want to trouble you. It's no trouble, he said. You need to eat something warm. After a moment, she nodded. Thank you. I think I will. Ethan went into the kitchen and began preparing a simple stew with vegetables and beans. He worked with a calm rhythm, chopping ingredients, stirring the pot, adding spices he knew well. Cooking wasn't his favorite chore, but he was good at it because living alone teaches a man to take care of himself. While he cooked, Nayeli remained near the fire, letting her body recover. From time to time, she glanced toward the kitchen, listening to the quiet sounds of pots and pans. The smell of warm food began to fill the house, making her realize how hungry she really was. When the meal was ready, Ethan set 2 bowls on the small wooden table and placed a chair for her. Come, sit, he said. She walked over and sat across from him. The warmth of the food felt comforting, almost healing. She took a spoonful, and her eyes softened. This is really good. Ethan smiled a little. Glad you like it. They ate slowly, not rushing through the meal. The longer they talked, the more they understood about each other. Nayeli spoke about her childhood, how her grandparents raised her with stories and songs, how she learned to dance at ceremonies, and how she always wanted to give something back to her community. Ethan shared memories of riding through open fields with his father, of nights spent under the stars, of the silence that had become a friend after his parents were gone. Despite coming from different worlds, they found common ground in their love for the land, their respect for family, and their desire to help others. At one point, Nayeli said, You don't talk like most people who live alone. You speak with calm, like someone who has made peace with things. Ethan looked down at his bowl. Maybe I have. Or maybe I just learned that life is easier when you stay patient. That's wisdom, she said, smiling. After they finished eating, Ethan put the dishes in the sink. Nayeli stood and offered to help, but he gently shook his head. You rest. You've had a long day. She returned to the sofa near the fire, pulling the blanket around herself again. Ethan sat across from her once more, though this time he was a bit more relaxed. The wind outside howled again, louder than before, and the door rattled slightly. Nayeli turned her head toward the sound, watching the shadows on the window. Storms always make me think of my grandfather, she said softly. He used to sit with me during big storms and tell me stories so I wouldn't be afraid. He said storms remind us of how strong the world is and how small we are. But he also said the world always calms down eventually, just like we do. Ethan nodded slowly. My father used to say something similar. He said storms remind us to appreciate the quiet days. Nayeli smiled again, and the firelight reflected softly in her eyes. The room felt warm, safe, and comfortable, even though they had only met a short time ago. There was a gentle trust growing between them, not rushed, not forced, simply natural. As the night grew deeper, the storm's sound became a steady reminder of how much worse things could have been if Ethan hadn't found her. Inside the ranch house, however, The two of them shared stories, laughter, small details about their lives, and thoughtful silences. The distance between their worlds felt smaller now. Two people from different backgrounds sat under the same roof, warmed by the same fire, protected from the same storm. The night that began with danger had become a night of understanding and simple human connection. Nayeli looked toward the flames one last time and whispered, almost to herself, "I'm grateful I found your light." Ethan didn't fully understand what she meant, but he was glad she felt safe. And somewhere deep inside, he felt grateful. Too grateful for the company, for the unexpected connection, and for the quiet warmth filling the room. Outside, the storm continued its wild dance. But inside the ranch house, peace settled gently, like soft snow on quiet ground. The night continued to grow colder outside, but inside the ranch house, the warmth from the fire and the soft light from the old lamp created a peaceful atmosphere. The storm pressed against the windows, but it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt far away, as if the house stood like a quiet island of safety in the middle of a wild world. Ethan added another piece of wood into the fireplace, and the flames rose a little higher. Nayeli watched the sparks dance upward. She felt safe now. But she also felt something else. Something calm. Something new. It was the feeling that she was exactly where she needed to be for the night. Ethan sat back in his chair. He didn't talk much, but his presence felt comforting. The kind of presence that didn't need many words to feel strong. For a while, both of them simply listened to the fire crackling and the wind humming outside. After some moments of silence, Nayeli spoke softly. "I haven't sat this quietly in a long time." Ethan nodded. "Sometimes quiet is good. Most days people are in a hurry. They forget how to sit still." "That's true," she said. "On the reservation, people are always doing something, helping family, working, preparing for events. Even the peaceful places feel busy sometimes." Ethan smiled slightly. "Life on a ranch is the opposite. It's busy, but also lonely at times. You have to do everything yourself. But nights like this make the work worth it." Nayeli looked around the room again, noticing details she had missed before. On the nearby shelf, she saw a small wooden carving of a horse. She reached toward it gently. "This is beautiful. Did you make it?" Ethan looked a little embarrassed but nodded. "A long time ago. My father taught me to carve wood. I'm not very good at it anymore." "It looks like someone carved it with care," she said. "The details are very soft." "My father had patient hands," Ethan said. "I try to follow what he taught me." "Try to follow what he taught me. Your father sounds like a good man." "He was," Ethan replied. "He believed in kindness. He always said that helping someone is never a wasted effort." Nayeli smiled warmly. "Then, he would be proud of you tonight." Ethan didn't respond right away. He simply nodded, and there was something gentle in his eyes. Another gust of wind rushed past the house, making a faint whistling sound. Nayeli pulled the blanket closer around herself. Though the fire kept the room warm enough, she wasn't cold anymore. But the sound reminded her of the long walk she had taken on that lonely road. "Were you scared out there?" Ethan asked carefully. Nayeli took a moment before answering. "A little. Not at first. But after the sun went down, the cold felt heavier, and the road felt longer. I couldn't see much, and the wind made it harder to hear anything. There was a moment when I thought maybe I wouldn't reach anywhere." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "You're very brave. Most people would have started to panic. I was close," she said honestly. "But then I remembered something my grandfather told me. He said that when the night feels too dark, you just search for even the smallest light. A light means hope." She looked at the warm glow of the fireplace and then towards Ethan. "And that's what I found here." Ethan felt something inside him soften. "I'm glad the light was on." Nayeli laughed gently. "Me too." For a while, they talked about small things: food, ranch chores, the wildlife in the area, the community events on the reservation. But then the conversation slowly shifted into deeper topics. Nayeli shared stories about her childhood, about how she used to follow her grandfather around the hills as he taught her about plants, stones, the meaning of silence. She spoke of the traditional dances she learned, of how the rhythm of the drums made her feel connected to her ancestors. Ethan listened quietly, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking a gentle question. He could see the love she had for her culture, and it made him admire her even more. Then Ethan spoke about his family, about his mother's laughter, about how his father knew every inch of the land, about how he grew up helping with chores before sunrise and riding horses before he was even tall enough to reach the saddle properly. Nayeli listened with respect. "It sounds like your childhood was full of hard work and love." "It was," Ethan said. "But after my parents passed away, the ranch felt too big, too quiet." "That must have been difficult," Nayeli said softly. "It was," Ethan admitted. "But the animals needed care. The fences needed fixing. The land needed tending. So I kept working. Work has a way of pushing sadness aside. At least for a little while." "You're strong," she said. Ethan shook his head slightly. "Not always. But I try." The fire flickered brighter for a moment, illuminating their faces. There was a sense of trust forming between them, not rushed, not forced, built slowly like a steady flame. Nayeli stood up and walked closer to the window. She looked out at the dark land, at the snow drifting lightly against the glass. "The world looks quiet from here," she said. "It is," Ethan replied. "Most nights I sit here and watch the land before going to sleep. It helps me think." "What do you think about?" "Life, the past, sometimes the future, but mostly, I think about how the land changes every day. One morning it's sunny and dry, the next day it's green. Tonight it's covered in cold wind. It reminds me that everything changes. Nothing stays the same forever." "That's wise," Nayeli said. "My grandfather used to say that the land teaches anyone who listens." Ethan smiled. "Then I guess I've been a student for a long time." Nayeli continued to look outside. "I used to be afraid of change. When I was younger, I wanted everything to stay the same. The same house, the same family, the same routines. But life had other plans. People grow older, work changes, seasons pass. Now I try to accept change instead of fearing it." "That takes strength," Ethan said. Nayeli turned from the window and returned to the sofa. Her steps were slow, thoughtful. She sat down again, wrapping the blanket around herself. Then the conversation shifted again, becoming even more open. Nayeli spoke about her hardships, nothing too dark, but enough to show her resilience. She talked about losing her grandfather a few years earlier, about the emptiness his absence left behind, about the responsibility she felt to carry his teachings forward. Ethan listened carefully, respecting every word. "It sounds like he was a great man." "He was," she said with a soft smile. "He told me that the world gives you strength when you give it kindness." "That sounds like something my father would say," Ethan replied. The similarities between their families surprised both of them. They came from different backgrounds, different histories, different worlds in many ways. Yet their values, kindness, patience, respect for land, love for family, felt strangely connected. At one point, the fire softened a little, and Ethan added more wood. The flames grew again, sending a warm glow across the room. Nayeli's face looked peaceful. The fear from earlier that evening had disappeared completely. "Do you ever feel," she began slowly, "that some meetings happen for a reason?" Ethan looked at her, thoughtful. "Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. The world brings people together at the right moment." She nodded gently. "I feel that about tonight." Ethan didn't answer right away. He simply held her gaze for a moment, and then said quietly, "Me too." The room grew silent again. But this silence was warm, almost soothing. It felt like they both knew something had shifted. Something quietly important. Something neither of them expected when the evening began. As hours passed, the storm finally softened. The wind grew quieter, and snow started falling gently outside, covering the world in a soft white layer. The danger had passed, but the peace inside the house stayed. Nayeli began to feel sleepy. Her eyes grew heavy, and she leaned back against the sofa. Ethan noticed immediately. "You should rest," he said gently. "You've had a long day." "I think you're right," she replied with a tired smile. "You can stay here tonight," Ethan said. "You'll be safe and warm." "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. "For everything." Ethan smiled softly. "I'm glad I could help." Nayeli closed her eyes slowly. The blanket wrapped around her, the fire warming the air, and the quiet safety of the ranch house allowed her to slip into peaceful rest. Ethan stayed awake a little longer, watching the fire, thinking about the strange, meaningful night that had brought a young Apache woman into his home. He felt grateful she was safe, grateful for her stories, grateful for her quiet strength. Outside, the storm finally faded, leaving only the soft whisper of falling snow. Inside, the ranch house held a gentle warmth, one that came not only from the fire, but from an unexpected connection formed under the protection of a winter night. The next morning arrived quietly, as if the world wanted to give Maria and Luke a calm space before life began moving again. A soft, gentle light spread across the ranch, touching the barn, the wooden fences, the sleeping horses, and the small cabin where Maria had rested. The cold air was still present, but the sun carried a warmth that felt like hope. Maria stepped outside, wrapped in the blanket Luke had given her the night before. She breathed in deeply and looked across the open fields. The sky stretched endlessly, painted in soft shades of gold and pale blue. Something about that view made her heart feel lighter. Last night, she had been cold, tired, and unsure of where she would go. This morning, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: safety. Luke was already awake, working near the stables. He brushed one of the horses, patting its neck gently. When he saw Maria walking toward him, he gave a small smile, the quiet kind that came from sincerity rather than habit. "You slept well?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "Your cabin is very warm. And thank you again, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Anyone would have helped." Maria knew that was not true. She had walked through many places before reaching this ranch. She had seen people avoid strangers. She had seen doors stay closed, even when someone needed help. But meeting Luke had shown her that kindness still existed in the world. She watched him tighten the saddle on his horse, and for a moment, she studied the way he worked, steady, calm, and patient. He moved like someone who had lived his whole life with responsibility resting on his shoulders. "I'll be riding out to check the north fence," he said. "A windstorm last night might have damaged part of it. You can stay inside and rest if you want." "Can I come with you?" Maria asked. He looked surprised. "You sure? It's a long ride, and cold air can be rough." "I'm used to the cold," she said with a small smile. "And I want to see more of your ranch." Luke hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay then. I'll get another horse ready." Maria helped where she could, brushing the horse's coat, handing Luke tools, checking the saddle straps. She enjoyed the simple work. It reminded her of the old days when her family lived close to the land. There was something healing about touching nature again. Soon they were both on horseback, moving down the long dirt path that led to the northern side of the ranch. The early sunlight made the frost sparkle on the grass, and the quietness around them felt peaceful. Maria closed her eyes for a second and let the cold breeze touch her face. It almost felt like the earth itself was telling her she was safe now. As they rode, Luke began to talk not about himself exactly, but about the land, the cattle, the storms he had survived, and the small joys of ranch life. "When I was younger," he said, "I thought running a ranch would be simple. But every season brings something new: floods, dry spells, broken fences, sick calves. There's always work." "But you stayed," Maria said. "Someone had to." Luke replied with a shrug. "My family built this place. I didn't want to let it fall." Maria listened carefully. She noticed how deep his loyalty ran to his home, to his animals, to the land he had grown up on. She admired that. It reminded her of her own people and the pride they carried for their traditions. After nearly an hour of riding, they reached the north fence. A large section had fallen from the storm, and Luke began inspecting the damage. Maria knelt beside him, picking up broken pieces of wood and handing him nails. "You don't have to work," he said. "You're a guest." "I want to help," she said firmly. "I don't like watching someone do everything alone." Her voice carried sincerity, and Luke gave a soft laugh, accepting her help. Together they began repairing the fence. The work was slow but steady. The cold wind made their fingers stiff, but they ignored it. Between them, there was a quiet teamwork that did not need many words. While placing a new board, Maria asked, "Luke, why do you live all the way out here alone? Don't you ever feel lonely?" He paused before answering. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But this ranch is home to me." The silence. "I guess I've gotten used to it," she nodded. Silence can be peaceful, but too much silence can make a person forget how to talk. Luke looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "You talk like someone who has traveled far." Maria gave a small, sad smile. "I have. Too far, sometimes." She did not add details. She did not need to. Luke understood enough to know her journey had not been easy. By the time they finished repairing the fence, the sun had risen higher, warming the air around them. They both climbed back onto their horses and slowly rode home. On the way back, Maria felt a strange mix of emotions: comfort, curiosity, and a warmth she had not expected. She wondered how one kind-hearted stranger could make her feel like she belonged somewhere, even if only for a short time. As they neared the ranch, Luke pointed to a small hill on the right. "There's a good view from up there. Want to see it before we go back?" Maria agreed. They guided their horses up the hill until they reached the top. From there, the entire ranch stretched out before them: the barns, the fields, the winding streams, the distant mountains. It was breathtaking. Maria stepped down from her horse and walked to the edge of the hill. The wind brushed through her hair. She felt like she could breathe deeper up here. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I come up here when life feels heavy," Luke said quietly behind her. "Makes things feel smaller," Maria nodded. "And makes the heart feel bigger." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood side by side, watching the land as birds flew across the sky. That peaceful silence between them felt natural, as if they had known each other much longer than one night. After returning to the ranch, Luke prepared a simple lunch. Maria helped him set the table. They talked about little things: the weather, the horses, the river. Near her old village, there was no pressure, no rush, just two people sharing a quiet moment. But as the day grew older, Maria felt a knot forming inside her. She knew she could not stay forever. She had come from far away, and there were still things she needed to understand about herself and her future. After lunch, she stepped outside and watched the sky slowly change color. The evening air had a hint of cold again. Luke came out and leaned against the fence beside her. "You're thinking about leaving," he said gently. Maria swallowed. "I don't want to leave. But I don't know where I belong yet. I don't want to depend on someone when I still need to discover my own path." Luke looked at her with respect rather than disappointment. "You're strong, Maria. I knew that the moment you knocked on my door." She turned toward him. "You helped me when I needed it most. I won't forget that. And if you ever need a place to rest again," Luke said, "this ranch will always welcome you." Her eyes softened. "Thank you." They stood together, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep violet. It was a quiet goodbye, but a peaceful one. Later that night, Maria packed the few things she had. She folded the blanket. Luke lent her, but he stopped her gently. "Keep it," he said, "for the road." Her heart warmed at his kindness. She stepped outside, the cold wind brushing her face. Luke walked with her to the edge of the path that led out of the ranch. "Will you be okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "I feel warm enough now." He understood what she meant. It was not just the blanket or the fire or the cabin. It was the kindness, the trust, the safety he had given her. She took one last look at the ranch, the place that had given her shelter, warmth, and hope. Then she turned and began walking down the path. Luke watched her until she became a small figure in the fading light. Maria did not know where her journey would take her next, but she knew she was stronger than before. She had found warmth in a world that sometimes felt cold. And somewhere behind her, on a quiet ranch under the wide sky, stood a man who had reminded her that kindness could still change the direction of a life, and that memory would stay with her wherever she went.